Welcome back into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy Rocky Magaña, Kramer Sandstone in the background, helping us make sure this thing stays afloat. Woo! Rocky, it's a lot more fun when the Kansas City Chiefs win football games. Today wasn't the prettiest of football games, but the Chiefs get it done against a tough Jacksonville team on the road with a 17-9 win. There were some negatives, but overall positive today. And I want to focus on the positives on today's show. But Rocky, it was an up and down game. It was a sloppy game. Chiefs got called for a boatload of penalties today, but all in all, their defense was spectacular. And we'll get into all of that. We'll get into the offense and, if there's any concerns moving forward, or if we saw enough signs of progress on Sunday to still feel good about the Chiefs' young group of pass catchers moving forward overall. But either way, huge win, especially when you saw the Las Vegas Raiders get smoked by the Buffalo Bills and then the Los Angeles Chargers once again just losing a very tight football game in overtime to the Tennessee Titans. Another kind of weird day of football across the NFL, and certainly not the kind of football that we're used to seeing from the Kansas City Chiefs. But they leave Jacksonville with the win, and that's the only thing that matters.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, Steven Serda. You're right. It is a whole lot more fun when the Chiefs pull out a victory like this. And, it's like Andy Reid once said, like, not every one of Beethoven's paintings were perfect, but, like, or what was it, the Picasso songs, whichever one he said, they weren't perfect, but at the end of the day, a win is a win, and you'll take it and you move on. There's a lot to build off of with this game. Strong outing by the defense. Sky Moore came up really clutch when the Chiefs needed him to, which I thought was important. Isaiah Pacheco, I thought really, he wasn't his greatest game, wasn't the flashiest game you're ever going to see out of a running back, but he got the job done. It was just really productive. And all in all, like, a lot to clean up, like a whole lot to clean up. Like you said, you go on the road against a playoff team and you walk out with a victory. You got to feel good about that, right? The offense still has some question marks to it, but they did enough today, and the defense stepped up. And I texted you earlier, we'll talk about this later on in the show, but like back-to-back really strong outings from the defense, I would say 3 games that they used to say, like, you win 1 game, they call that a win. You win 2 games, they call it back-to-back. You win 3 games, it's a streak. I would say the same thing with defensive outings with this Chiefs team. We got back-to-back strong defensive outings right now. You put a third one together, that's a streak, Steven.
So let's start on the offensive side of the ball, and I've got plenty of thoughts on the defense. I promise we will get to all of that, but I want to focus on the offense because I want to get into, and we're already seeing in the comments, like another terrible offensive performance from the Kansas City Chiefs. So I want to focus on what the Chiefs did on the offensive side of the ball today before we get into the brilliance that was the Chiefs defense. I mean, going to Jacksonville and you hold a very strong offensive team to 9 points. That's an impressive showing. I don't care if they had 4 touchdowns that were out of bounds in the back of the end zone. But offensively for the Kansas City Chiefs, it wasn't so different from week 1 against the Detroit Lions. A lot of sloppy play early on. And, I don't remember. I don't think I mentioned it to you guys, but I'm sitting on the couch watching this football game, watching the offense just kind of look bad, not really move the ball, show no signs of explosiveness like we have seen in the past. And Mahomes just holding onto the football way too long because guys are struggling to get open, which was a problem in week 1. And we saw it carry over to week 2. But all in all, they wind up putting it together. And you mentioned Isaiah Pacheco. I think that he was the reason they were able to put together enough and get enough out there on the field to come away with the win in Jacksonville, because Pacheco was great when he got the opportunities. And we saw them open the second half after looking pretty rough in the first half offensively. And they finally just decided, okay, we're going to give him the opportunity to just ram this thing down the Jaguars' throat until they prove that they can stop it. And he doesn't end the day with a huge amount of carries or anything, but he was wildly effective with those carries. And we saw him, run people over and run into contact and create some explosive runs. And this offensive line, we know that on the interior, this is what they are really, really good at. And this is what we've been asking for now. And, you saw on Thursday night, the Philadelphia Eagles, who opened that game against the Vikings, really struggling offensively. And then they just settled down and said, okay, we're going to do what we did all of last season, because no one proved that they could truly stop us when we decide to just run the football down your throat. And that's what they did. And then after that, they took off and they scored a bunch of points against the Minnesota Vikings. We saw the Chiefs do that in the second half of this game. I'm begging Andy Reid to please do that more often, because we know how special Mahomes is. We know this passing attack is a work in progress, and they're going to get better. I believe that they're going to get better, and they're going to improve as the season goes on. But right now, it seems like that's the best thing you can do on the offensive side of the ball. So please, can we see more Isaiah Pacheco? He finally appears totally healthy and like he is ready to take on a significant workload. The passing game will come along. Just please run the football a little bit more, because it was wildly effective today.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Isaiah Pacheco, you talk about he didn't get a ton of carries, but wildly effective. 70 yards on 12 carries. That's 5.8 yards a carry, man. You're averaging almost 6 yards a carry every time you touch the ball. And 2 of those carries are very, very important first down conversions. One to ice the game, and the other one on 3rd and 1 when they desperately needed to keep the drive alive. And so you take those 2 carries out, you're really talking about 68 yards on 10 carries for Isaiah Pacheco. He obviously, half of those yards came on one long, 30-yard run, but he was wildly effective. He was the let's say old school. It's his second year in the season. The Isaiah Pacheco, remember from last year, running angry every time he touches the ball. Get me up off the ground. Get off of me. Get out of my way. Fight his way out of the crowd. I am juiced up 100% of the time. And there's no reason not to give it to him on those short yardage situations. I mean, you have the best interior in the NFL on offensive line, and then you have the angriest runner in the NFL. I'm not saying Isaiah Pacheco is the best running back. He is the angriest running back with the ball in his hands. If you need 1 yard, you have 3 maulers and a guy who's pissed off 24/7 with the ball in his hands. Thank you, Andy Reid. Thank you. Do not give the ball to Blake Bell ever again. Do not spread out 4 wide receivers and try to throw the ball. Do not try to give the ball on a jet sweep. Just give the damn ball to Isaiah Pacheco up the middle for a yard. It won you the football game today. From me to you, Andy Reid. Thank you. And Andy Reid's old. They mentioned it on the broadcast. It's West Coast offensive philosophy. You pass to set up to run. This year, I'm sorry, until this wide receiver unit gets a little bit more mature and they start getting consistent separation and they start kind of understanding depth of routes and spacing. There's not a lot of great things happening with the wide receivers at the moment because they're young and they're still developing. But until that happens, the Chiefs may have to be a run to set up the pass offense. You have Patrick Mahomes. He's the greatest player in the history of football. But you may need to help him out a little bit by getting him some heavier boxes.
And I think hopefully I say that hopefully the second half was a sign of Andy Reid acknowledging that we got to adapt a little bit here moving forward the rest of the way while we're still developing these young guys. I tend to think it probably isn't because we've had these kinds of games from Andy Reid before, and then next week, Patrick Mahomes will probably throw the football 50 times. But the progress that we saw offensively today, though, I still think is promising, at least from the pass catchers. And we'll get in the offensive line performance because it was not great on Sunday. But as far as the pass catchers go, Sky Moore finds the end zone. I am so thrilled for Sky Moore after last week. Kadarius Toney had some nice moments. We'll get into him too. But Sky Moore specifically, because this is a guy that all of us are projecting to take this huge leap forward this season, obviously has a total disaster of a week 1 performance, but finds the end zone on Sunday. And then in the closing moments of the game, Chiefs need a first down to try to close this thing up, lock up a win in Jacksonville. And Mahomes buys time, finally finds Sky Moore, who broke free down the field, and he rips off a 54-yard gain. I was jumping up and down in my living room going nuts during that Sky Moore play because I've been really in on him as a player and I want him to succeed. And I think that he's got talent despite the fact that we just haven't really seen any of it yet. And we finally saw a glimpse of it today. We finally saw improvement. We finally saw him make impact plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I could not be more thrilled for him as a player in week 2.
I echo that 100%. It seems to be, and it's not shocking considering that he had very poor vertical numbers at the combine. But if you make Sky Moore jump for the ball, it's a bad idea. If his feet are on the ground and you put a back shoulder, you get him the ball in space, and he can do some really nice things with the ball in his hands. He can make some contested catches, but he's not going to be a guy who jumps and goes up and gets the ball for you. You got plenty of those guys on the roster, but Pat just has to know that if he's throwing the ball to Sky Moore has to have his feet on the ground. And I'm really happy for Sky because he had a really bad week 1. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. He should have caught that 4th down pass. I said that last week, and this week he made up for it by making the game-winning plays. Like, the Chiefs, he scored the winning touchdown, right? And the Chiefs needed a huge play there on that last drive to run the clock out, and he made it. So, everything that happened in week 1 is 100% forgotten in my book. He adjusted to what happened in week 1, and he came out, and I thought on the whole, like, the Chiefs offense had a lot of struggles and issues early on, but it wasn't like in week 1 where it was only the wide receivers, it seemed like, that were making the mistakes. Like hats off to Kadarius Toney. He came out and made some plays and didn't have the same drop issues. Sky Moore made a couple big plays. Justin Watson's fumble is unfortunate. I think it was just, I don't know if you could put that on. It was just one of those plays, I think, that happens.
Yeah, and I think it was clearly an emphasis from Jacksonville because they were trying to punch that football out the entire game. And Kadarius Toney also had a fumble. He was just able to recover it himself. But like, I think that Chiefs fans should be more optimistic about Kadarius Toney. And we talked about it this week on Show and BK, and I thought Brandon Kiley really brought up a good point. Like, we need to start seeing Kadarius Toney prove that he is a wide receiver and not just a gadget player, Swiss Army knife kind of weapon. And even in the snaps that he got today and the opportunities that he got today, I think that's how the Chiefs were kind of deploying him. Like, they weren't deploying him out there like a wide receiver who's going to run this super deep route tree or something like that. They're putting him out there for design screens and getting him these short passes and trying to get him in space and use his shiftiness to get him out and hopefully create big gains. And I think at this point in his career, that's pretty much all he is. And if that's the only way they can utilize him, so be it. But find a way to get him on the field and find a way for him to make impact plays, and don't put him in bad situations, because we still just haven't seen it from him yet. And with his injury history and his inability to stay on the football field in general, I think that's probably the most effective way to use him until you feel more confident that he can be like, he can actually go out there and play, 85 to 90% of the snaps, because he's just not there yet offensively for the Chiefs.
And you know what? He might not ever be there, and that's fine, honestly, as long as you know what he is and you know how to use him. Like, if he's just going to be an offensive weapon gadget player, that's fine. The Chiefs have had a lot of those over the years. They've had, DeAnthony Thomas, Dexter McCluster, Dante Hall to an extent. Like this isn't anything new to Chiefs fans. Like, just don't tell us he's your wide receiver 1 and get us all excited for him being wide receiver 1, and then come out and he's a gadget player. Like, if he's a gadget player and he's an effective offensive weapon, totally fine. Then that means that MVS is your wide receiver, your de facto wide receiver 1 then. And you just got to own the fact that you don't have a wide receiver 1. And Travis Kelce's your wide receiver 1. Travis Kelce obviously had a little bit of rust today. The knee is not 100%. Like, like hats off from going out there, being gritty, being gutty, and playing. Like, obviously we love Kelce. Never going to question Kelce at all. But he's not back yet. Like, he's still working his way back. But at 33 years old, a hyperextended knee, honest to God, anybody who's over the age of 30 and you hurt your knee, like, you just think to yourself, this is permanent. like you're never you're not going to get back. And I'm not saying he's not going to get back, but I'm just saying your body doesn't respond like it did in your 20s.
And it was pretty clear that Travis Kelce, and it was reported before the game, that he was going to be on some kind of snap count today. And it was pretty clear that he was. Obviously, he finds the end zone, which is huge, because the Chiefs desperately needed to get something going offensively, and you could see it up here on the screen right now. Like, they just needed to score, and they needed somebody to make a play, and Mahomes went back to the guy that he knows the best, the Hall of Famer who is going to make plays, but he was obviously limited in today's game. And, we'll see how he gets deployed next week. The Chiefs don't seem to be too concerned with his long-term health right now. So it was just nice to see him find the end zone. But, Patrick Mahomes connects with 10 different pass catchers today. And I'm counting 10 because I'm counting the Donovan Smith catch, which, if you missed it, is a broken play where Patrick Mahomes just had all kinds of pressure around him. He just looks for anybody in a white and red Chiefs jersey and flicks the ball. It just happens to be to an ineligible wide receiver or ineligible offensive lineman in Donovan Smith, who catches it, says, "What are you doing?" Like, clearly looking like, why do I have the football right now? And doesn't even make a play. It's obviously a penalty, and they wind up punting the football. But it was kind of a funny sequence. But that's kind of what they were last season, and going back into this season, it's even more because you just don't know who is going to be the big play guy until Travis Kelce is 100% back. And Justin Watson had a nice moment today, a big play when they really needed one. We mentioned Sky Moore. Like, they just got to get these guys more reps and get them more opportunities to step up. So, like, overall offensively, I think I was most glad that, it's concerning that the Chiefs struggled to put up points and that they don't look like this high-powered passing attack and offense that can score on anybody at will like we're used to seeing. But I'm willing to chalk it all up to they're just so young and they still have so much learning and developing to do that I'm just thankful that they mixed it up a little bit today. And I'm just thankful that we got to see the rushing attack. I'm thankful that we got to see a lot of bodies get in the mix and make plays and have opportunities to do something like that. So I think that's really all you can expect for them at this point in the season as we move along here. And the concern, I think, too, coming out of this game maybe is the offensive line, though we were talking about it before the show. And I'm not worried about Jawaan Taylor. I know he exited the game after back-to-back holding penalties, and, maybe it was just a breather. Like, the coaches just, we need you to get your head right, big guy. You're our big offensive free agent. We need you to stay in there, and we need you to start making plays. You can't keep getting called for all these penalties. But I also think some of this is bogus because of his quick first step. And everybody saying last week, oh, he's false starting on every single play. He's been doing this for years, but it was made such a big deal because he's now playing for the defending Super Bowl champions that the NFL said, we're going to emphasize those calls this week. And it felt like they were only emphasizing the calls for Jawaan Taylor in the Kansas City Chiefs. So they wind up with a ton of penalties in this game and a ton of sloppy play. But, Jawaan Taylor's going to have to adjust that. They're going to have to work with him because obviously the NFL is paying attention to it now. But the problem that I have with it is that they're only paying attention to Jawaan Taylor. They're only looking at him. And I think that's kind of bogus. Like, refs should not be keying in on a single individual in a football game and watching for him to make a mistake when there's countless mistakes throughout a football game that never get called.
Oh, 100%. But make no mistake, he was earlier a couple of times. Like, he
Sure.
committed those penalties, but they were watching him closer than they were watching everybody else. Obviously, the old adage is there's a penalty on every single play, right? That they just don't get called. And they were watching Jawaan Taylor every single snap. And I'll say this, like, yeah, he needs to go back to the drawing board, but at halftime, they should have gone back to the drawing board. Like after he got his first penalty on the sideline, they should have said, they're going to make an emphasis on this today. They're watching you. Don't do it. You got to adjust in game. And he just kept doing it, and he kept costing the team. Like, at some point, like that's probably why they set him down to calm him down, because it was like, come on, man. Like they told you they're going to make this an emphasis. They called you on it once already. Like, how many times they got to call you on this until you realize that they're going to call you on this? And obviously it's not a panic button thing. I think he's a talented enough offensive lineman, honestly, that he doesn't need to do it. Like, everybody's always looking for that 1/2 inch edge, because in the NFL, and we've all seen It's Any Given Sunday, right? Like you gotta fight for that 1 inch. That's my Al Pacino impersonation, by the way. You gotta for that one. It's a game of inches, and it is a game of inches. And he's trying to get that inch. The problem is that he was getting that inch earlier. He was getting more than an inch, and the referees were calling him on it. And he's got to be able to adjust in game. If you got to be able to make in game adjustments as a professional athlete.
I just think it's really bogus that the NFL is all of a sudden enforcing this thing that he's been doing his entire career, and they're only paying attention to him. I just don't think that's fair, and it puts the Chiefs at a disadvantage because, like, if this was a thing, shouldn't they have been working on that in the offseason and making sure that he could come into the NFL regular season and not have to totally adjust how he's played his entire NFL career so far? Like, I think this is going to continue to be an issue probably. And this is something they're going to have to work on a lot this week during practice. And hopefully he can make the adjustments because we know he's a talented player, but they can't have you out there getting called for penalties 6 times a game or something like that. Like, that's just not something you can have on the offensive side of the ball for the Kansas City Chiefs. But I am confident in their coaching staff and that they'll get things figured out.
Especially you can't have that for this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Like this is an offense that's in transition, and we've talked about they're developing, but this is also, make no mistake, the least developed offensive skill set of players that Patrick Mahomes has played with. Like, this is probably, if we're being honest, the worst skill set of play, the worst offense that Patrick Mahomes has played with since he's been in Kansas City, as far as skill players go. And so you can't have an offense where Patrick Mahomes needs to spread it around to 10 different guys while he's trying to develop an entire wide receiver room and get these guys up to speed, and have your offensive line, which is supposed to be your strength, shooting you in the foot. So last year you could absorb it a lot better than you could have this year. This is not the season to have an offensive line that's going to be shooting you in the foot on a consistent basis.
I want to remind you guys, if you're in the comments, use hashtag AP Rapid Reaction. We'll get to some of your questions and observations at the end of the show. Andy Reid speaking to the media right now. As far as injuries coming out of this game, wide receiver Kadarius Toney's got some kind of left foot injury, but according to Harold Kuntz of Fox 4 Kansas City, said Reid did not sound like he seemed all that concerned about it, like it was a serious thing. And Justin Watson apparently suffering from dehydration in that Jacksonville humidity. So seems like everybody's healthy coming out of this game for the most part, and that's big. We saw Brian Cook go down at one point for the Chiefs defense, but he was able to come back a couple of plays later. And I think it's time for us to get into this defense, Rocky. And, strong week 1 performance from the Chris Jones-less Kansas City Chiefs defensive line and overall against a very explosive Lions offense. But we saw today why all offseason we've been talking about this might be the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has ever had. This might be the best defense that they've had in Kansas City in a long time. And there is talented players on this defense. There is depth on this defense. They hold Jacksonville to 9 points. Chris Jones in his return, 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, blowing plays up left and right, absolutely destroying this Jacksonville offensive line, and just looking every bit as dominant as anybody could have hoped that he would. And this is a player that did not participate in any offseason workout programs with the team, did not go to a single training camp practice, did not practice with the Kansas City Chiefs at all until this week, which he did in a limited capacity all week because they wanted to slowly ramp him up after not having any live reps for an entire NFL offseason. And he showed up at the facility this week looking like he is in fantastic shape, looking like he is ready to bet on himself, to hit all these incentives and recoup all that money that he lost during his holdout. And today was a very, very good start for Chris Jones to try to get all that money back because he looked absolutely dominant for the Kansas City Chiefs defense today.
Woo! Contract year is undefeated, baby. It looked like Chris Jones almost had millions of dollars on the line with every single sack that he gets this year, and with winning Defensive Player of the Year, or with the Chiefs winning football games. He looked as good as we've ever seen him, and it's impressive. He said that he was ready to go. He said he was ready to rock and roll and collect receipts. I mean, you may not have liked how the situation panned out, and you might not have liked how he played it, but now that he's back on the field, you got to be loving the product that he's putting out there, because he looked good. And the entire defensive line looked good. Derek Nottie looked great in run defense. Let's be honest. He stuck the middle of the line. George Karlaftis, my God, George Karlaftis, you are 3 times better than you were last year. He just continues to grow and get better. and prove that the Chiefs were right in selecting him in the first round last year, and that when he had slid, his draft stock slid in the draft process last season. Because at one point last year, he was considered a top 10 pick, and right now through 2 weeks, he looks like he should have been a top 10 pick. The guy looks awesome, and you figure in Mike Dana contract year again, baby, gets another sack today. This front four, you get Charles Omenihu back in the mix, and I mean, you're going to be having a lot of quarterbacks running around back there in yellow pants because these guys are going to be coming for you, and they're going to be putting the hurt on you real fast.
It's week 7 when Charles Omenihu factors into the mix here for this defensive line through 2 weeks. Like, they didn't even have Chris Jones week 1. They put together a very strong performance against a very good offensive line, an offensive line that's much better than Jacksonville's offensive line. And then they add in Chris Jones this week, and they were putting tons of pressure on Trevor Lawrence. Like, Chris Jones was blowing this thing up, felt like on almost every snap. But you mentioned Derek Nottie and Mike Dana and George Karlaftis, and they were all great today too. The Chiefs pass rush is scary. Like, it looks like it is a legitimate problem, especially if Chris Jones is going to be playing like this all year to try to get all that money back. Like, that defensive play of the year might be in play if he continues to play like this throughout the entirety of the regular season, because they were special today. And I'm really excited about them moving forward. I'm really excited that Chris Jones is back and just looks as dominant as he was the last time we saw him on a football field. But then you start talking about the secondary and the linebackers. And we did see Nick Bolton and Willie Gay both go down at one point in this game. They returned and they seem fine. So it doesn't seem like anything that we really need to worry about, but we'll monitor their status in practice this week at arrowheadpride.com. But the secondary looks strong again. And there was a couple of frustrating moments. I'm a little worried about L'Jarius Sneed. Maybe this is just missing so much practice time and the knee still bothering him. He's trying to get back to 100%. It just seems like he's kind of slow right now. Like, he's processing slow. He's reacting slow. And I think some of that obviously is because of the injury and what he's fighting through right now, and still playing. And he still had some nice moments today. Like, he was in coverage on one of those touchdowns that went out of bounds because he was right there to push the wide receiver out of bounds before he could haul it in and get his feet down. That's an impact play from L'Jarius Sneed. Had some other up and down moments, but Trent McDuffie still looks like he is an ascending star for the Chiefs secondary. Brian Cook had some nice moments. Jalen Watson had a couple of huge moments in this game. Like, not only did the Chiefs pass rush look dominant today and look like it is one of the more formidable units in the NFL, and they're going to add Charles Omenihu here in a month, their secondary looks like it is legit, and their secondary looks like it can lock teams down and give opposing offenses problems. And I am as excited of this Chiefs defense as I have any unit for the Kansas City Chiefs in a long time.
I mean, you talk about the run game and like protecting the boundary. Leo Chenal, if they tried to run, they were run outside at all. That boy was coming downhill with a fury, and he was not making it fun for you to get hit. Like, that guy, my God, Leo Chenal might have knocked a couple years off of somebody's life today. And I mean, speaking of hard hits, Jalen Watson knocked the Holy Spirit out of a boy when he caught the ball. I mean, geez Louise. There was one play, I think it was Christian Kirk, caught the ball, and Jalen Watson was right there and just laid him out. That's something that you don't see a lot out of cornerbacks, that you do see out of the Chiefs cornerbacks, that I'll say is they tackle with aggression. And that's a lot of things. Like, they want to hit you. And there's a lot of cornerbacks out there that want to play the ball or kind of arm tackle a guy or push him out of bounds. Like Justin Reed wants to hit you. Brian Cook wants to hit you. Jalen Watson wants to hit you. L'Jarius Sneed wants to hit you. Trent McDuffie goes out there and wants to hit you because everybody else wants to hit you. Like, it's not even actually in his game, but it's how our secondary plays. And surprisingly enough, I thought Willie Gay looked pretty good against Evan Ingram in coverage today as well. The only bad spot that I saw today in the defense at all was, like you mentioned, was L'Jarius Sneed. I don't think his knee is 100%. I don't think his knee is right. You saw him playing super soft. He was given a lot of cushion, and he was afraid to break on the ball. Like, he was almost waiting. If a guy would snap it off on like a little curl route or something like that, or like an out pattern, he would almost wait for the ball to be in the air before he broke down on it, because he was afraid that they were going to double move and hit it up the sideline. He wasn't going to be able to plant and go. And so he looked hesitant on driving down on the play, which is unfortunate because previously that has been one of the strengths of his game, right? It's just is driving down and making the play. And so hopefully it's just a thing where like the knees continue to get better and it's just not 100% yet, or maybe he doesn't trust it yet. But I would say that I am concerned about Snead's health at this
It's
point in time.
I I am too, and I'm willing to bet that it's just the knee. And I also have to wonder if, there might not be a circumstance where the Chiefs say, like, maybe we need to give him some time to sit out. But L'Jarius Sneed himself is in a contract season. And so I would imagine that he's like, no, I need to get out there and play. I need to prove that I deserve to be here long term, or that another NFL team is going to see what I can do out here on this football field and give me a long term deal because I need to get paid this offseason. So I don't blame him for wanting to play through it, but it does seem right now he's just not 100%, and he's not the player that we've been used to seeing over the last 2 years for the Kansas City Chiefs. But you mentioned the way the secondary tackles, and especially Trent McDuffie, who is a smaller cornerback, but is sure a tackler as anybody in the secondary for the Chiefs. It's just impressive to watch them play. And, to hold a team like Jacksonville that is this talented offensively to 9 points is impressive by any standard. And for the second week in a row, I came away from a Kansas City Chiefs football game being wildly more impressed with the defense than the offense. And that is not something that's easy to do when you have Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback. Like, this defense has a very high ceiling, and I don't think we've even come close to seeing it yet.
Oh, we haven't seen it yet, and it's fun to watch this defense continue to grow. Like we saw them all get drafted, together last year, and they all came in and they grew through the season. And now you see them kind of playing with a little bit of confidence, right? You see them playing with a little bit of swagger. This game may have not have been nearly as close if Zay Jones doesn't, 100% try to murder Brian Cook from behind when he's going for an interception. Like Brian Cook had to beat on that ball, and he was going to intercept that ball if Zay Jones didn't inexplicably get away with an offensive pass interference that hurt Cook and sent him out of the game. Thank goodness Cook did come back in the game later and seemed to be okay. But you just got a group of guys who were young enough to not know better last year when they won the Super Bowl, and now they're champions and they know they're champions. And since then, all the talk's been about Mahomes. Like the Chiefs won the Super Bowl because of Mahomes is a superhero on his ankle and game-winning drive and all of this. And in the back of their mind somewhere, they got to be thinking, we're a world championship defense, and now it's our time to go out there and put our stamp on this game and show who we are. And I'm excited to watch it, Serda. Like these guys are fun to watch. Let's not act like the Chiefs just played good defense against two scrubs. They didn't play the Bears and the Cardinals, the last 2 weeks. Like Detroit's predicted to go to the playoffs, and the Jaguars were in the playoffs last year. Trevor Lawrence was the first overall pick and supposed to be one of the best quarterbacks to come out in the draft, in the last 10 years. And they have a great offensive mind as their head coach. Like, these are not scrub teams that the Chiefs are coming out and putting the hurt on defensively. And so I'm honestly excited to see what they do against lesser competition. Like it could be a bloodbath.
Yeah, it's just hard not to be impressed with what this defense has put together through 2 weeks. And yeah, against two very good football teams that are projected to be playoff teams. And you mentioned the Chicago Bears, and they are coming to Kansas City next week. And we talked about it this week on Arrowhead Pride. Like, if the Chiefs went down to Jacksonville, fall to 0-2 to start the season, how do you feel moving forward? And I was like, I'm not concerned at all. Have you looked at their schedule coming up? Chicago Bears. Then they have the New York Jets, which that felt like it was going to be a primetime, huge football matchup. But obviously, we all know Aaron Rodgers out for the season. Zach Wilson now totally changes the dynamic of that matchup. But also, that Jets defense is very, very good. So that could be a brutal offensive showing for the Chiefs if they continue to play like this. But we know that you really shouldn't be concerned about that Jets offense with Zach Wilson under center. And then you have the Minnesota Vikings, who can score a lot of points, but can't stop anybody defensively. Then the Denver Broncos, then the Chargers, then the Broncos again. And then you've got this huge matchup against the Miami Dolphins on November 5th. Like, that's a very favorable schedule coming up. And if they can figure it out offensively to where they get any kind of consistency at all and look like a little bit more like the Chiefs offense that we are used to seeing, and this defense continues to play this way, then they're right back up there as, one of the serious Super Bowl contenders. Not that they aren't right now, but I feel like through 2 games, there's more Chiefs doubters than I feel like there has been in a long time right now, just based on their performance through 2 weeks, even though they find themselves at 1-1, having just beaten a playoff caliber team in the Jacksonville Jaguars.
People are always looking for the next thing. And to get the next thing, you have to tear down the current thing, right? And they always want to see a downfall. They always are looking to try to knock the crown off the head of the king, right? And so, right, the Chiefs have been on the mountaintop, in the AFC, recently, and they're the current NFL champions. And so everybody wants new blood. It's like when Tom Brady was with the Pats. Honestly, like I hated the Patriots when they had Tom Brady. I was like, enough of the Patriots winning every single year and everybody thinking that the Patriots are so great. Like, they're not that great, but they were that great. And the Chiefs have been that great. And people are sick and tired of watching the Chiefs win, because when the Chiefs win, it means that their team doesn't have a chance. That means their team is not winning, and they want their team to win. So they want the Chiefs to lose. And these national analysts and the people who write these articles, like it or not, they got into football because they love football. And if they love football, they're a fan of a team on some level. And if the Chiefs are not their team, then they're not going to like it. So every national analyst that's not Nick Wright is essentially trying to tear down the Kansas City Chiefs at this moment, because they want their team to be relevant. But guess what? If the Chiefs roll into Germany sitting 6-2, like you can't really be too down on them, right? And I'm saying that's saying that the Chiefs are going to lose to the Chargers. The Chiefs probably aren't going to lose to the Chargers. The Chargers are going to charger. The Chiefs are going to roll. Let's face it. The Chiefs are probably going to roll into Germany 7-1, and then that's going to be a heck of a matchup against the Dolphins, and who knows what's going to happen. But you got to feel a whole lot better today than you felt this time last week.
Yeah, I really don't have much of a concern level with the offense right now, because if I'm more confident, if I'm confident in this defense, I will always be confident that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are going to figure it out. It's just going to take a little bit of time, and I think we really underestimated the growing pains that they were going to go through offensively this season, ahead of the season, that are apparent now through 2 weeks of the regular season in the NFL. But I want to remind you guys, if you're listening to us on the podcast page, make sure you stick around after the break. We'll have all the post-game press conferences, but let's get to some comments and observations from the Kansas City Chiefs win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. When a team elects to go this young, you're going to have extreme highs and lows until the Chiefs get some game reps under these young guys' belts. Yeah, it's exactly what we're saying. There's always going to be overreaction to a win or a loss based on a particular unit's performance. Through 2 games offensively, this isn't the same kind of Chiefs offense that we're used to seeing, but we should have known that coming into the season. There's too many question marks at pass catcher. And then you have Travis Kelce suffering the injury last minute and them not being able to adapt to it. You have them kind of slow playing Isaiah Pacheco, but it is apparent that he is 100% healthy now. We need to see more of him moving forward. They need to lean on that run game a little bit while they develop these wide receivers and make some teams actually respect their run game again, because I think that will really open things up for the Chiefs offensively.
Well, yeah, and also if you come out and make them respect the run game and run it down their throat, you're going to get the defense tired. Defenders don't like defending the run game consistently, because tackling people is hard, and tackling somebody who wants to hit you going 100 miles an hour is hard, and eventually you get tired of doing it. But it was just like the defense last year. Like, the secondary last year had some really rough spots early in the season, and they got to develop. Like, you're right. They got to get reps under their belt. And until this receiving core gets reps under their belt, until this offensive line fully gels, like, there's going to be some rough patches, but you got Patrick Mahomes to carry you through, and you got what looks like an elite defense right now out there keeping you in ball games. And as long as you have those 2 things, you got to feel pretty good moving forward.
From Pete, hats off to the D. Proud of those guys. If we are honest, damn, we couldn't have imagined Taylor would have been this bad for us. Again, yeah, it's a rough game against his former team, but I tend to think they'll get it figured out. They'll have him make adjustments. And I also think today was just unfair for him to be solely targeted by the referees in that way. And I think that is really bogus. And honestly, if I'm the NFL Players Association, I might file a complaint about that because it was pretty blatantly obvious to me that they were only watching him for penalties throughout a lot of this game. And I don't think that's fair. It gives the opposing team an unfair advantage, in my opinion. But I have faith that this offensive line and their staff, they're really good. They get a lot out of these guys. I have faith that they'll adjust and he'll be fine moving forward.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to go back and look at where players lined up and how many people actually got called for penalties this week, because I would venture to guess that you're absolutely right, Serda, that it was a bit of targeting of Taylor, and that the NFL didn't like what they saw on social media, so they wanted to quote unquote slap Taylor on the wrist for what he did, even though it's been happening and everybody does it. I mean,
Yeah.
JJ Watt said that his entire career offensive linemen have been doing this because they want whatever edge they can get. And so, I mean, yeah, it sucks. He's got to adjust. Like you said, Andy Heck will get in there and get it adjusted though. But we're right. D, hats off. You get the game ball. Defense gets the game ball today. 100% best outing we've seen in a long time from the defense.
They were spectacular today from Christopher Miller. This defense is legit, especially with CJ out there. Yeah. It was the highlight of my day to talk about how dominant this Chiefs defense was. And, for as much as we talked all off season, like, this unit could really be a top 10 defense in the NFL. Like, I did not expect this kind of performance today. So if you're feeling down about the offense and really like questioning their ability moving forward, at least hang your hat on how amazing the Chiefs defense looked today.
No rust, which is incredible. Like, you have no training camp. You miss week 1. You watch the game from a suite. You come out and zero rust, and you look like the dominant player you are. You look like you deserve every single penny that you wanted, Chris Jones. Like, dang, like you weren't the only defender out there playing today, but there was definitely an extra element and an extra ingredient to the defense that wasn't there last week with Chris Jones on the field. Like, he's a complete game changer. He's a wrecker, and he is a defensive player of the year candidate.
Yeah, be very excited about this defense moving forward, especially with Chris Jones out there right now. Could not have been more impressive today against a very explosive offense, and especially the way that they quieted Calvin Ridley. And we know what a special player he is for the Jags. So impressive performance from the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Offense did enough to get a win. Chiefs improved to 1-1, and they have the 0-2 Chicago Bears, who have looked very, very bad in their first 2 games of the season, coming to Arrowhead next Sunday. That's a 3:25 kickoff here in Kansas City as the Chiefs look to improve to 2-1. Yeah, that's really all I got. I am just floating right now after last week's rough loss and a win for the Kansas City Chiefs. As always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything that we do here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. We've got all the post-game coverage for you at arrowheadpride.com. So as soon as we sign off, immediately head over there. Please follow my guy Rocky at Rocky Magaña on Twitter. You can follow at Kramer Talks. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. We will be back tomorrow. Myself and Pete Sweeney will have a fresh edition of the Arrowhead Pride Report. We'll talk to you then.